Alright, what's going on, you guys? So I'm at my shop doing a little bit of work to the monster truck. It's been a while since I did a video on this truck, and that's just because I'm waiting on parts still. I should have had this thing done already, but because of the coronavirus and that whole situation, parts got delayed a bit. So right now everything's back on track. All the key components I've been waiting on, they're almost done. Like the knuckles for the steering and the parts called the champagnes are being made from a company called Engineering. They've actually been in the works for quite a while. And I just got off the phone with them a few days ago. Those are almost done. And when I say knuckles and champagnes, what I'm talking about, I'll show you. So these pieces right here is a champagne, the knuckle, that's a spindle. And those yellow pieces right there, those are the hubs, those are the planetaries. And there's nothing really wrong with these. I could use them. And these are Rockwell PS250s. Well, actually, no, they're Rockwell PS205s. Very similar to a PS250. A lot of people don't even know the difference, but the 205 is a little bit lighter duty. I also had a full set of the 250s, but I knew I wasn't going to use them, so I sold them to a friend of mine. And the new ones I have being made, like I said, they're from Engineering. Guy does amazing work, and they're all one-piece knuckles. They're billet, chromoly, champagnes, all the kingpins, all like the brass inserts, new spindles, all that stuff. So that stuff should be done soon, hopefully, and I can finally get this truck up and running. So right there's the motor. It's a 540 big Chevy. It runs on alcohol, pro and heads. It's all freshened up, aluminum rods and all that, Cali's crank. Blower's not on it, and I haven't finished the fuel system yet. And the reason why the motor's not in the truck is I'm deciding when I want to run for a fuel system. So for the longest time, these trucks ran an Enderle mechanical fuel injection, which was great. It just wasn't that efficient. And if you don't tune it right, you could damage your motor and all that, and you could waste fuel. So I'm probably going to be going with a Holley EFI setup. So I'm just getting all the parts together for that now. So once I get all that, then I could drop the engine in the truck. Right behind it, you can see the BKTs. They're all dusty and dirty from sitting, but they're brand new. You can see they still even have little whiskers on them. Those are beadlock wheels made by Reservoir. There's pretty much two companies that get all my parts from, Reservoir and Concussion Motorsports. So Concussion Motorsports did the chassis, and my shocks, wheels, steering cylinders, and a lot of other parts were made by Reservoir, Pablo Huffaker. He drove a Gravedigger truck for a while, so he's got a business in Texas. He makes some awesome parts. Let me get this motor out of the way. I'll pull one of these tires out, show you the wheels, how nice they are. So right there you can see, right here it's got his logo, Reservoir. That's what we call a stiffening ring. He welds in, or he gives you the option, and he puts those extra stiffening rings in so you're less likely to bend a wheel. Same thing with the front beadlock rings, got that extra ring in it just to make it stronger. So as far as what I've gotten done on the truck since the last video, just a lot of little things that needed to get done that take up a lot of time. Like I mounted the accelerator pedal. If you look right here, I made this riser bracket. So that lifts the pedal up, tips it forward. Because on these trucks, you want to make everything so it fits you perfect like a glove. I mounted this as the auto return control unit. I got that from Reservoir. I made this shifter mount right here, and the wires run up through there because I like to keep wires tucked in wherever possible so they're not sticking out, and it actually makes it easier to rewire things if they're tucked in where they're supposed to be. I made up a gauge panel right there. I mounted the tack on the other side. And one thing I do differently than a lot of people is my rear steer. I like it by the shifter, which is right here. This is your rear steer, and this is an on-off switch to arm and disarm the auto return. A lot of people put it up there by the steering wheel, but I don't know, I've always liked to have it right here. And right there, it's a nice position when you're driving. You can set your hand in there. And it's just a comfortable position. It's personal preference. And also, a lot of people set their switches up so if you turn the switch to the right, the wheels turn to the right in the back. And then some people make it so if you hit the switch right, the wheels turn left. That's how I like it. Again, that's personal preference. And the reason you would arm and disarm the auto return, so normally when you're driving around and you hit the rear steer, like you turn it to the right, as soon as you let go, your wheels come back. If you turn this off and you go like that, now your wheels are to the right and they stay there, so you can do donuts and stuff like that. I got the steering column all mounted in with the orbital valve. Again, this is the gauge pot I made. This switch right here, that's just for the gauge lights. So if you're doing like a night show. I made that seat frame. I still have to have it powder coated. I'm just waiting until my harnesses come in so I can weld the tabs in. And then I'll send that out to powder coat. That's a Richardson racing seat. There's pretty much 3 main seat manufacturers: Richardson, Butler, and ISP. And from what I heard, Richardson, Butler, and ISP used to all be partners. And then they all kind of just branched out and did their own thing. So this is a real high quality seat. I like it better than ISP and Butler, but that's again personal preference. I still got to do something with that brake pedal. I'll be putting like a bigger pedal on it. Sometimes I get bored sitting back here waiting for parts to come in, so I polish this floor I made. And it's pretty neat. When I made this floor, it's 3 pieces. There's the front, the middle, and this outer piece. A lot of times when people do it, they put the seam right here. So you have a back half and a front half. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make it so I could easily just pull this piece out. So I had to cut this just right here. It's at a slight angle, so this piece can easily be removed to, like, if you want to access wiring or things like that. That's just a foam mock-up block. It's a lightweight version of the real block. The reason I used that one is I still had to weld in all the motor plate supports, so it's much easier to do that with a foam block, a mock-up block, than a real one because it's way lighter. So for these motor plates, I use a 3/8 thick plate. Most people use 1/4 inch, and it's aluminum. It's 6061 aluminum. The advantage of that, it's stronger, but also this plate seals against where the water pump goes. So if you have a thicker plate, less likely to leak. And it's just stronger, and if you can use a thicker plate, why not? The only thing that you have to worry about is when you get a torque converter, you got to make sure the converter pads are welded on for a 1/4 inch or a 3/8 thick plate instead of 1/4 inch. Right here is the power steering reservoir. It's aluminum, non-vented. That way if the truck rolls over, it doesn't spill all over the place. I mounted it in with some tube clamps I made. So I made these clamps right here. It's pretty cool. I made a jig so I can make a bunch of them. They're all the same. Sometimes I prefer to do that instead of welding to the frame in case you want to change locations or whatever. Because really, it wouldn't seem like it, but component mounting is a huge factor in things like weight and where you want weight to go and all that. And there's a pressure relief valve. So what the pressure relief valve does, that's for steering. So that's for the front steering. So that way, like if you go off a jump and you land and the wheels turn, you don't like blow lines out and things like that. And I mounted it back here because that way when I run the hoses to the engine, because the power steering pump mounts the engine on a part called the crank drive. That's this piece right here. It's also made by Reservoir. And it just mounts to the motor like that. I got the sway bars all in. This sway bar, I mounted it all the way to the back like this because this is the right length arm. Typically, I would want this in forward a little bit more so that way you don't bang it up in the back, but I'll just make up a nice bumper and it'll be fine. Brakes are all in and bled. I did a video on those before. Those came from a company called The Brake Man. So these are the shocks made by Reservoir. They're a 26-inch travel front, 30-inch travel rear. Those mounts that they're mounted to, I got those from Patrick Enterprises. He's also the same guy I got the sway bar kit from. And they do great work too. That kit came in, I just had to weld it up. And it's bolted to the axle now with little spacers right there. That simulates the flange of the champagne that the knuckles bolt to. That's just so I could get everything set up and keep working on it. It's really not much more to show right now. Let me see, I can show you the transfer case. I may have showed this in an earlier video. That's a Profab drop box. There's an oil accumulator. I also picked up a new welder because I got these two. That's a Miller 252. So I also own a muffler shop, and this is like the main welder I've used for years. These 252s have been awesome. They're real durable. But this one was in my welding shop. This is one of the first ones I bought, and one of my employees who no longer works for me, he let a lift down on it. He forgot to pull a welder out from underneath the lift before he let the car down. So believe it or not, though, it still works perfect, but it's getting pretty beat. This is my TIG welder. This is a Miller Synchrowave 200. So the Synchrowave 200 isn't even made anymore, and I picked this thing up a few years ago, and I didn't know it was a discontinued welder. I went and bought it. And these are big transformer welders. So it draws a ton of amps. So looking at that tag right there, when you put this thing on AC, which is what you need, when you're welding aluminum, you always switch your machine to AC. At full power, this draws 54 amps. So that's a lot. So this thing always trips breakers, even with a 50 amp breaker. So I'll show you the new welder I picked up. This right here, this is a Multimatic 220. And what this is a multi-process welder, meaning you can do MIG, TIG, and stick. So I've never been into those like multi-process welders because I always thought like they would never do one great, they would do like all three okay. But that's not the case. This little welder is more powerful than that big synchro-wave TIG welder because it's inverter technology, whereas the synchro-wave is a transformer. And this thing came ready to go. It came with all the cords, all the controls. There's the foot pedal for the TIG, the MIG gun, all your ground cables, they even gave you a little spool of wire. The only drawback to this welder, it can only run a 10-pound spool just because the size of it. Whereas something like the 252 is much bigger, it can use a 44-pound spool. And that's on wheels. This isn't. But it's pretty portable, it only weighs about 50 pounds. But I decided to make a cart for it, so I'll show you that real quick. So this is the cart. I bent this out of 095 volt DOM tubing. And because this is a MIG and TIG, it uses two different gas bottles. Right back here, you got the top one's a TIG, bottom's a MIG. So right there, I made a spot where you could put two different gas bottles. So that way you don't have to switch it over every time. I still have to finish the base. I gotta add wheels. I ordered some wheels for it. Because the nice thing about this welder is it can run on 220 or 110. And it's really easy. You can just unscrew the plug. Right here, this 220 end unscrews. And then right inside there, right here, there's another plug that screws on, that's just 110, and it automatically switches over. And I was very surprised, like honestly, the first TIG weld I did with this on aluminum came out, I was impressed. Let me show you. So this was the pedal riser I made, and that was like the very first weld with the new welder. I didn't use any like practice pieces or anything just to see how well, and it was perfect. I liked it a lot, so that's great. So definitely the Miller Multimatic 220. So far, is the best TIG welder I've ever used, by far. So there's really not much more to show you. Let me see what else. It's my arm Italian. Steering cylinders, I think I did a video on these before. Those are from Reservoir. There's the auto return. The way this works, this hooks up to the steering cylinders, and you got these ball valves, or ball switches. So when it hits one, it returns. I'll do more of a video on that thing when I install it on the truck. It's pretty cool how those work. They wire up with electric solenoids and all that stuff. That's about it. Oh yeah, let me just pop this door open real quick. There's my trailer. I got my trailer registered last week. It's my rig, the Peterbilt. It's a 359 extended hood, the cat motor. So trailer, I got some work to do with. Mechanically, it's awesome. It's all perfectly maintained. All new brake chambers, bearings, brakes, seals, all that stuff. So that's about it for now. I'll be doing some more updates as I go along on this thing, and maybe next time I'll do some wrenching videos when I'm working on it again. So until next time, take care. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Oh, and hit the bell.